right, guys, so I want to start off with complaining. Good way to start. I'm gonna complain a little bit here, and maybe you will join me in this complaint, but does it seem like there is road construction everywhere? Like everywhere. I don't live in Manteca, but I hear your guys' complaints. But living in Modesto, it feels like every road is under construction. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very happy for the jobs. I love that people are making money out there. But when I'm trying to come to work and I did not look on my app to see the construction, it can be a little frustrated. And then especially when you get stuck in it, you're like, well, this is my life right now as I'm in traffic. Now, here's the thing. If you guys remember my story, I used to work in road construction. And I do want to tell you, I loved it. I loved working. I loved shoveling. I loved jackhammering. I loved just doing all the hard labor. But there is one job in road construction that I absolutely despised. And do you guys know what that is? Thank you, Mary. Were you here on Thursday? It is the flagger. The person who holds the stop sign and the slow sign, that is the worst job. Now, I will tell you, like when I would show up to work and the supervisor would be like, all right, Brian, you're on the sign, I knew that it was going to be a tough day. Now, here's why, because I fell under, when I first joined, every time we would drive and my dad would see the flagger, he would say, oh, that must be the easiest job in the world. That guy's getting paid $20+ an hour to just stand there. And so I remember the first day when it's like, Brian, you're flagging. I'm like, yes! That was the last time I ever said that. Because here's the truth. I would challenge you to stand in one spot for 10 hours. And tell me how your body feels. Because when you are standing there, your feet are killing you, your back is killing you, time is incredibly slow. In order to make time go faster, you try and snack on your lunch, and then by 10 a.m., you went through your whole lunch. And then sometimes the people you work with are rude, and they won't give you bathroom breaks, so you're also just standing there having to go to the bathroom while trying to do your job. But here is the hardest part of that job. And it is, everybody hates you. Like anytime you stop somebody, they treat you like you had a personal vendetta against them for stopping them. And so I've had people yell at me. I've had people give me the finger. I had people that when I finally let them go, they started veering towards me to make a point out of me. But here's the truth. The truth for when it comes to a flagger and the truth when it comes to when you have a detour on the road, we're just redirecting you for your betterment, for your safety. We are protecting you from probably a giant hole in the ground. We're protecting you from the heavy machinery that your car will just not win that fight. And we're also trying to protect the workers behind us, that they're trusting us that you are not going to hit them. So anytime you're in a construction site and being detoured, it is truly for your betterment and maybe the people in your car's betterment, but overall, everyone's betterment. And here's the truth. When it comes to God, when God redirects us in our life, it is for our betterment. And maybe not just for our betterment, but for the betterment of those around us, or maybe people that we have yet to be in contact with. When God redirects, it is for the betterment. And we see this in Scripture all the time. We see when it came to Moses, when God redirected Moses, he spoke to Moses and told him that he is choosing Moses to go and help free his people. We see this with Mary and Joseph, when Mary and Joseph was redirected by God, that God sent a messenger, an angel, to speak to them about their life and how their life is going to get redirected. We see it with Paul, that when he was on his way to go persecute Christians, God redirected him, and Jesus came to him in like a vision and spoke to him. And then later that day, Paul became a Christian and started spreading the gospel. So when God redirects, it is for the betterment of his people. And so this morning, I actually want to look at somebody in Scripture who was redirected, but unlike the others that I just explained, he didn't have a theophany, which is like a visible manifestation of God coming down, whether through that's his voice or through an angel. The man we're looking at today was just burdened. His heart was broken, and he brought it to God. So in your Bibles, please go to Nehemiah. We're going to be talking about Nehemiah, how Nehemiah's heart was broken, and what he did when it came to all of this. And while you're getting there, I want to explain what's going on in the story of Nehemiah. I want to give you some context. And here's what happened. 140 years earlier, God's people were exiled after Jerusalem was destroyed. And the reason Jerusalem was destroyed was because God gave them warning after warning that if you do not change your evil ways, if you do not confess and turn towards me, I'm going to let the nations come in and destroy you. And of course, like God's people do, they ignored him. And God fulfilled his promise. He let the nations come and destroy them. And Jerusalem, God's people, they lost everything that day. They lost their home, they lost their protection, and they lost their freedom as a nation. But God, being such a wonderful God, he did not leave them hanging. In fact, he gives them a prophecy of what's to come through Jeremiah. And you guys have probably memorized this verse before, but it starts in Jeremiah 29:11. But here's what God says. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me, and when you seek me with all your heart, I will be found by you, declares the Lord. And I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations and all the places where I have driven you, declares the Lord. And I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. So God had this promise for his people, that you got destroyed, you didn't listen to me, but don't worry, you will get to come back home one day. And God fulfilled it. God's people went back home. The promise was fulfilled. The exiles eventually went home. But then Nehemiah, 140 years later, hears a report. He gets a report from his brother about his hometown, about what happened or what the current state of Jerusalem. And here's what it says in Jeremiah 1, starting in verse 3. It says, they told him, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The walls of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates are destroyed by fire. So here's the truth. 140 years later, Jerusalem had not been rebuilt. There's a constant reminder of what God's people have done. All of their sins, all of them turning from God is just a constant reminder. They lost their freedom as a nation. And to make matters worse, since their walls and everything was destroyed, they had no defense against attacks. And as Nehemiah's brother puts it, the remnant are in great trouble and shame. And so Nehemiah gets this report. And then Nehemiah tells us exactly how he feels about this. Nehemiah says, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. So Nehemiah is experiencing, and this is our first point of when maybe God is redirecting our life. Nehemiah is feeling a burden right now. He's feeling a burden. And I want to give you some context of who Nehemiah is. You might have heard this before. But Nehemiah is a cupbearer, which means when it comes to the king, Nehemiah is the one that pours the wine and tastes the wine to see if it's poisoned. I've always told people that I would be kind of fearful when that job opening opened up, because I would ask what happened to the last guy. But he tasted the wine, the poisoned wine, or hopefully not poisoned wine. So what it means is Nehemiah actually has a very comfortable job, as he kind of is living what God promised, that even though you were exile, I have plans for your welfare. So one of God's people is in the king's palace. And as a cupbearer, you had influence, and Nehemiah had that. So he is living a comfortable life. But he hears this report from Jerusalem, and Nehemiah could have just been so selfish and said, oh man, that is awful for them. I'm going to go back and do my job. No, it says that when he heard this report, it said that he wept and he mourned for days. His heart was broken from this report. His heart is broken that after still 140 years, Jerusalem has not been rebuilt. And my question for you is, have you ever experienced something like that? Where you're living a comfortable life, everything is going great, and then something happens, something sparks, and then you start feeling a burden. Something just breaks your heart, and you just cannot get it off your mind. I think we see this a lot when it comes to people who maybe they start having a heart for international missions, like far away. They've seen something or they experienced something, they went on a missions trip, And after that, they cannot get it off their mind, that their heart is all about that community, that people group. And then some people make the big change that they want to then become a missionary and go. Like their heart is so broken that they make a big change. But maybe it's not that. Maybe your heart has been broken for something in our community. Maybe you've seen the homeless population and want to help as much as possible. Maybe your heart is broken for families who do not have that much money and don't have that much access to get food for their family, and which is such a blessing that we have Living Well at our church, and there's people whose heart is so broken that they've jumped into Living Well and helped our families receive food. Or maybe your heart is broken for when you hear about the kids who do not have parents, and your heart is like, man, do I foster? Do I adopt? What do I do to help these kids? Or maybe it's very close to home. Maybe there's something internal that God is putting on your heart that you need to start changing. Maybe your desire in this is starting to change. Maybe God is talking to you of how to work on your marriage, how to work on your parenting, how to change who you are at work, or just a sin in your life that God is finally starting to try and get into. See, it starts with a burden. It starts with something on our heart that is just breaking our heart, and we cannot get it off our mind. And Nehemiah, what's happening to him is it says that as he heard this report, he is mourning, he is weeping, and he was doing it for days. And he felt this burden. And then he did our next point, which is he was seeking the Lord in it. And when we are feeling a burden in our heart, we have to seek the Lord. So here's what Nehemiah did. He says, after that, it says, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down, wept, and mourned for days. And he says, I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He continued fasting and praying. Peter Scazzero, in his book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, he says this, and I want you guys to hear this because we need to hear this and experience this. He says, allow yourself to experience the full weight of your feelings. Allow them without censoring them. Then you can reflect and thoughtfully decide what to do with them. Trust God to come to you through them. This is the first step in the hard work of discipleship. So Peter's telling us, man, when you're feeling something, let the feelings happen. Experience those feelings. Do not hide from your feelings. Do not bury your feelings. Sit with them. Experience them. And then decide what you're going to do with them. And trust that God is going to show up in them. This is what Nehemiah does. It says Nehemiah, when he was feeling burdened, how his heart was broken, he tells us that he continued fasting and praying to God. He allowed himself to feel his emotions. And when you read scripture, fasting and praying was very common with God's people. They would fast. People would fast because they wanted no distractions. They want to fully put themselves into what they're trying to learn from God, hear from God. Just a great discipline. They would fast and they would pray. They would cut out all the distractions. And this is how Nehemiah responded through prayer and fasting. He brought how he was feeling about his hometown to his father. He was seeking God. And so in order to do this, he said, he fasted and prayed. And Nehemiah actually gives us a look into his prayer life, which is incredible because when you guys read this, you can also see where Jesus, when he taught us the Lord's Prayer, you can see similarities in Nehemiah's prayer and Jesus' prayer life and Jesus praying the Lord's Prayer. So here's what Nehemiah said in his prayer. He said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you have commanded your servant Moses. That's his prayer. He jumps in. And what do we see in this prayer? He first puts himself in a humbling position. And he gives God all glory. And he gives God all credit. He puts God where God belongs, above all. And he puts himself in a humbling posture when he says, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God. Which, if you compare it to the Lord's Prayer, when it says, Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Church, going a little off script here, I was teaching this in Back to Basics the other week. You know, a lot of times in our church, we have felt so much love and grace from God, and we read and we hear and we sing that Jesus is a friend of mine, that we forget that God is also our King, and that we have to revere him, that we have to put ourselves in a posture of fully submitting to who God is in our life. He is a friend. We do have grace. We do have mercy. He did bring us salvation, but he is also our King. He is our King and someone to be worshiped. And so right here, Nehemiah is doing that. He is putting God in that position of revering him, of a king. Now, very easy for Nehemiah, as his whole job is to serve a king. Probably harder for us in America to understand what it's like to serve. But I would say in our prayer practice, remember who you are. Remember the position. Remember who God is. And that's what Nehemiah is showing us as he is saying, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God. So he humbles himself. But then he also puts himself in a humbling posture by confessing his sins to God, confessing where he went wrong, where the people of Israel went wrong. He is asking for forgiveness. He says, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. And he makes it so personal. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We've acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. See, Nehemiah gives us a great example of when our hearts are feeling burdened and we are feeling like God might be redirecting where we are in life. Feel the emotions, but seek God in it. Make sure that it is from God and not just an impulsive decision that you want to make. Go to God, confess what you have done, confess what is on your heart, and stay in those moments. Again, don't make something impulsive, because we see that Nehemiah prayed day and night about this. And in fact, what we can discover is Nehemiah sat on this for 4 months. As he heard this report and his heart was broken, he was praying day and night for 4 months before he kind of decided what he was going to do. And Nehemiah lets us know what he's going to do. In Nehemiah 1:11, he says, O Lord, let your heart be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. This man. So what Nehemiah is deciding is he is going to talk to the king. What he is going to do is he is going to speak up. And that's our next point, is when you're feeling redirected, speak up. And so what Nehemiah is going to do is Nehemiah is going to put it all on the line. He is going to put his job on the line, his comfortability on the line. And Jim B. reminded me of this. He's also putting his life on the line. Because if the king doesn't like what he's hearing, that is the end of Nehemiah. But his heart is so broken to him, it is worth it. He is putting it all on the line. And I believe that we can all understand that feeling that Nehemiah might be feeling. Have you ever had a moment leading up to where you want to have a tough conversation with somebody? A tough conversation, you're going through all your emotions, and maybe you're practicing in the mirror, or maybe just be me, but it's like, okay, I'm going to say this, and if he says this, then I'm going to say this. And then if he says this, then I'm going to say, you know what? I don't need this. I don't need to be here. I quit. And then you have all the emotions and the anger and maybe the butterflies leading up, and you've convinced yourself, and you're like, Brian, you got this. Brian, you got this. Don't chicken out. You got this. Nehemiah is probably experiencing all of that. He's ramping up. I'm gonna bring this up to the king. I'm going to do it. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Lord, I need your hand in on this. Please open up the conversation so I can have this tough conversation. So Nehemiah prays. He first prayed. He said, Lord, give success to your servant today and grant me mercy in the sight of the king. I'm going to talk to him about everything. He prayed for God to guide this conversation. And then here's what happens. Nehemiah 2:1-2. It says, when wine was before him, talking about the king, it says, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now, I had not been sad in his presence before. And the king said to me, why is your face sad? seeing you are not sick, this is nothing but sadness of the heart. And then Nehemiah says, and then I was very much afraid. Very much afraid. So as Nehemiah enters the king's presence, we see God immediately opening the door for Nehemiah. And that could be a little freaked out. It was one of those moments where he could have been like, hey, God, I didn't mean like right away. Right away. But he immediately brings it up. Or the king brings it up because it says Nehemiah was sad. Now, I don't know if Nehemiah was projecting his sadness on purpose, where he's trying to pour the king wine and going, I don't know if he did that, or if he was just so sick, he got himself like physically looking sick because he was so nervous about this conversation. But whatever happened, the king noticed, and the king brought it up. And again, Jim B reminded me that if you were a cupbearer and you were sad in the presence of the king, he could kill you right then and there. So when Nehemiah says, and then I was afraid, he is afraid for his life. And so in this moment, what does Nehemiah do? All those butterflies flopping around in the stomach, heart racing, back starting to sweat, which is a symptom of mine. I don't know if you have that as well. But Nehemiah had the ability to say, I'm fine, we're good, sorry, never again will I be sad. Or if he's going to talk to the king. And here's what Nehemiah says. I said to the king, let the king live forever. Buttering him up a little bit. Let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? And then the king said to me, well, what are you requesting? So here's the truth. When we feel a redirection happening, when we feel a burden and feel the emotions and we bring it to God and see what God is asking for us in this moment, we also need to speak up. We need to speak up. Talk to the people that whatever we're feeling, talk to the people where this is going to affect their life. Like if you're going to make a big decision or you're feeling like a big decision is happening, speak up. Let people who God has put in your life or people that you have trusted with your life, let them have the job to give you wisdom in it. To say, hey, I've actually was going to talk to you about this. Or I can see this. Like I think this is from God. Or let people say, hey, I don't think that's what God is saying to you. That might just be something you really, really want, which then you can discover, is it still a good thing or not? But speak up to the people that it affects. I'll give you an example. When I graduated from Bible college, my wife and I, Audra, we got married, and immediately we moved to Wisconsin. And we did youth ministry out in Wisconsin. And then after doing that for 2 years, we felt like a redirection was happening, and we then moved to Washington State in the Seattle area, where we started a youth group and took over the children's and youth ministry for about 6 years. And then after doing that, and that church went through a lot of turmoil that I really felt like God had me there to keep that church alive. But after the church was comfortable, we felt like God was saying, hey, it's time to go back home to Modesto to be close to family. And felt God redirecting and all of that and talked to my wife. But I'm going to be honest with you. If I didn't talk to my wife about any of those moves and any of those redirection, then it would have been Brian moved to Wisconsin, Brian moved to Washington State, and Brian moved back home while Audra was not married to Brian. So when you're making a move, or you feel like God's redirecting, speak up to the people that have a right to speak up in that moment. And so Nehemiah obviously brings it up to the king. He talks to the king. He had the opportunity. He prayed for this opportunity, and God opened the door for him, something that he was thinking about for 4 months. And so the king asks, what is wrong? And then when he tells him, the king then asks, what do you want me to do about it? What are you requesting? And again, another moment where Nehemiah could be freaking out. It's bad enough to tell him what's on your heart. Now he's saying, hey, what do you want me to do? And so Nehemiah is left with, okay, do I just say, oh, no, we're good. I just wanted to let you know why I was sad. No big deal. I'll get over it. I'm a guy. I'm supposed to bottle these emotions anyways. Not true, man. But another emotion where these emotions are coming in. And so when the king asked him this question, Here's what Nehemiah does, and it's amazing. He said, so I prayed to the God of heaven. So as the king asked him this, he stopped and prayed just one more time before he was going to do what he's about to do. And what he's about to do is he's going to make a choice. And that's our last point here, is make a choice. When God is redirecting your heart and you know it's from God, then make a choice. Don't just keep sitting on it. Don't just keep talking about it. Make a choice. And this is what Nehemiah does. He makes a choice, and he tells the king exactly what he's hoping for. He said, I said to the king, let the king, oh, sorry, wrong one. Still again, buttering up. He says, and I said to the king, if it pleases the king and your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. And the king said to me, the queen sitting beside him, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me where I had given him a time. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple and for the walls of the city and the house that I shall occupy. And so the king asks what he wants, and you can tell that Nehemiah had a vision. Sitting on this idea for 4 months, Nehemiah knew exactly what he wanted. Rick Warren, he wrote this in a book that he collaborated with different pastors, including Francis Chan. He says this, everything that happens in life begins with a dream. Somebody has to imagine it first. This is the gift that God gave to us, the ability to dream and envision and imagine something before it becomes into a reality. Every building we see was first imagined by an architect before it was built. Every piece of art was imagined before it was painted. Every song was imagined before it was written. Every athletic award, every gold medal, the athlete imagined before it ever happened. Every church that has been started, somebody, either a group of people or a single church planter, imagine that church first. Rarely does anything happen until somebody starts a dream. And so, Nehemiah, he had a dream. And when the king asked what you were asking for, he very much knew what he wanted. And we can see him sitting on it for 4 months. He asked the king, I need you to give me a letter so that I can go home. Give me a letter that I can have safe passage. In a letter to ask the king of the forest, or the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gate of the fortress of the temple and the walls of the city. And also, I'm going to need a house to live in, so I'm going to need some wood for that as well. Now, I'm telling you, Nehemiah put everything on the line. I think if I was in this situation and I was flooded with all of these emotions, and the king's like, hey, what are you asking for? I would just be like, hey, just send me to Judah. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out when I get there. But man, I mean, at this point, he must be like, my life is on the line. I might as well ask for the whole 9 yards here. And then what happens? He said, and the king granted me what I asked. And here's the cool part. He said, and for the good hand of my God was upon me. So beautiful, church, because again, here's the truth. Nehemiah did not have this moment like we saw with Moses, like we saw with Mary and Joseph, like we saw with Paul, where God's voice or Jesus' voice or an angel was talking to him. Nehemiah didn't have this moment where God's like, God, I choose you, Nehemiah, to go fix Jerusalem. This was a guy whose heart was broken, and he was wondering, is God asking him to do something? And he just prayed to God. And in those prayers, he did not hear God's voice. There was nothing audible there. It was just a man who sat with it, prayed about it, and he could not get it off his mind that he finally decided what he was going to do. And God's hand was upon it, according to Nehemiah. And if you read the rest of this book, you will see again and again that God opening the doors for Nehemiah to rebuild Jerusalem. Because when God redirects our heart, it is for the betterment. It is for the betterment of his people. And so Nehemiah felt that, and as he took a step of faith, and a bigger step of faith, and a bigger step of faith, he was doing this for the Lord. And throughout the book of Nehemiah, he is praying to God and giving God all credit. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful vision. Because why I love Nehemiah so much is I think that is all of us in this room. I would say the majority of us have not heard a voice of God, but we have felt God's redirection again and again in our life, and doors just keep opening up that are just unexplainable, that shouldn't be happening. But God puts it on our heart, redirects us, and we just go with it and see this has to be from God. This has to be from God. This wouldn't come from me. Men, if you were at Steak and Study on Wednesday, you heard that from the speaker, who a man at 40 years old felt like God was telling him to leave ministry and go be a police officer. And it was a funny story where he was saying he was trying to keep up with 20-year-olds in police academy. And he said in there that it had to be from God because that would have never have been a dream that he would have had for himself. So maybe that's you, or maybe you're starting to feel that God is putting something on your heart. And I want to say this, it doesn't have to be like, I got to quit my job and I'm going into ministry. I'm going to quit. I'm going to sell everything and I'm going to go to another country and be a missionary. It could be there's something in your life that God is just finally redirecting, finally changing your heart. I hear testimonies so many times of people who were recovering from alcohol or drugs where it said they prayed to God like, hey, help me get rid of this. And they said the next time they did it, it was disgusting, like dirt or mud in their mouth. A redirection from God. And I want to share a story with you of a man that I know from my last church. And here was going on where I felt like God was redirecting him. I was putting on a camp for my church. And I was like 2 days before the camp. Everything was filled up. I had the buses ready to go. Like everything was perfect. All we needed to do was get to the camp. But then I got a message from a man who reached out to me and said, hey, Brian, if it's at all possible, I would love for my boys to be able to go to this camp. And mind you, we are 2 days from this camp. And not a big deal. I'm like, oh yeah, we always have room. I'm never going to turn kids down. But here's the thing. I know his boys. And his boys were very, very difficult. In fact, him and his wife adopted those 3 boys who had issues from fetal alcohol syndrome. Yes. And so these 2 wonderful people at our church adopted these 3 boys and have raised them their whole lives. And so when he reached out to me and said, can they go to camp? I'm like, absolutely. But I knew this was going to take some work on my leaders. I'm going to have to figure this out. And he told me in that, he goes, hey, but my boys need constant supervision, and one of them's a runner. I was like, oh, great. So, and I'm like, when does he run? He goes, in the middle of the night. I'm like, so I need a leader who's like not going to sleep during this camp to keep an eye on this boy. And I'll be honest with you, he did run. He did. He did escape the camp, and we found him. But what was cool is I'm like, I'm gonna figure this out. But it was even a redirection for me. I'm like, okay, I knew this was going too smooth, God. So how do I make this work? So I'm trying to make it work. And then he reached back out to me and he said, hey, Brian, I reached out to their uncle. Just so happened that their uncle was on our worship team for the camp. And he said, I reached out to the uncle and he said he'll be their camp leader, their cabin leader. And I'm like, great. And he said, also, if you don't mind, and if I can, I would like to go to the camp as well. I'm like, this is an answer from God. I'm like, you can absolutely, these boys can go, you can go, it's all free. Everyone's free. Making my life easier. And so he went to camp, and it was awesome. And sometimes what's really cool about youth camps is when adults go, you'll see like the camp meant more to them than it did the kids. And this is what happened with this man. And so what I didn't know going to this camp is he really, really wanted his boys to go. He really felt like this was like going to be a turning point for his boys. And it actually was, and it was a beautiful thing to see. And he knew he needed to go. He just felt like God was putting it on his heart to go. But there was one major thing that I didn't know about him that he let me know while we're at camp, is that dude smoked some cigs. That dude was like a two-packer a day, I found out. And he realized that if he went to this camp, he wouldn't be able to smoke cigarettes. And personally, he didn't want to because he didn't want to smell like cigarettes for the kids there or for the other leaders. So as he was like feeling this burden that his boys needed to go to camp, he then was feeling this burden of, do I need to quit smoking cigarettes? And so he made a choice. He said, I'm going to go to this camp, and this weekend is going to be the weekend that I'm going to be nicotine free. And so he didn't tell me that leading into it, because I probably been really nice, like, Dean, you can go off to the woods. Just don't cause a forest fire or something. But he told me, like, one of the last nights of the camp. And I then allowed him to share his testimony in front of everybody. Then after he said that, the whole camp, students, leaders, all surrounded him and started praying for him for strength throughout all of this. And here what's really cool is after that weekend, he didn't touch any cigarettes. He was absolutely nicotine free. But I haven't talked, it was amazing. I haven't talked to Dino since I think I talked to him like once or twice since I moved back, but I reached out to him last week just to double check, because I didn't want to put him on blast and then he heard about it and now he feels shame and guilt, but maybe it would have been good for him. But I reached out to Dino and I was like, hey Dino, I'm just checking, man. Are you still nicotine free? And he wrote to me and gave me the exact amount of days of how long he's been nicotine free, which is over 1,800 days, which then I did the math. This summer is 5 years from him. 5 years. All because his heart was broken 2 days before a camp that his boys needed to go. And it caused him to make a huge life decision. Because when God redirects us, it is for the betterment of his people, the betterment for you, and for that, the betterment of his family. Because now he's not bringing the secondhand smoke, all that stuff into the house to those kids. So when God redirects, it can be something like that. It doesn't need to be, I got to move and change everything. So my request for you is this week, just sit down, listen to God. What's he putting on your heart? Where is he redirecting you? Where can you take the same steps that Nehemiah has done, that feel your burden? Seek God into it. Speak up to people. And then make a choice. Don't just be all talk and no game. Make a choice.